I'm here with Alexander Mercouris, editor-in-chief of the Duran. Alexander, let's talk a little bit more, a lot more, about Joe Biden, Hunter Biden, and Ukraine, and the scandal that is unfolding, which is a scandal that was created at the hands of a whistleblower, a leak in essence. And we'll get into as to, who we think or what we think was behind this leak, which, as we called it in our last video, is boomeranging right back at Biden. And this was, I'll say this was easy to call because we had Biden's own admission that he engaged in a quid pro quo with the Ukraine government, that he ordered them to fire Viktor Shokin, who was the prosecutor general at the time, in order to not prosecute his son, Hunter Biden, who was involved with Devon Archer. Devon Archer is the former roommate of Christopher Hines, of the Hines family, of which John Kerry has married into, as well as a Ukraine oligarch in this shadowy company known as Burisma, this energy company that had various projects throughout Ukraine. One of those projects was in the east of Ukraine for oil and gas and fracking and different energy activities, which we will also get into. There's a lot that we need to dissect here. But Alexander, we have a Twitter tirade, a Twitter storm from Giuliani. And Giuliani just lays it out. So let me just get to a lot of tweets. Bear with me, Alexander, as I read the tweets before we get to your analysis. So here we go. Giuliani starts. New fact. One $3 million payment to Biden's son from Ukraine to Latvia to Cyprus to U.S. When prosecutor asked Cyprus for amount going to son, he was told U.S. Embassy, Obama's, instructed them not to provide the amount. Prosecutor getting too close to son, and Biden had him fired. Today, though, it's the $3 million laundered payment. Classical proof of guilty knowledge and intent. That was kept from you by swamp media. Ukraine, Latvia, Cyprus, U.S. is a usual route for laundering money. Obama's U.S. Embassy told Cyprus Bank not to disclose amount to Biden. Stinks! Exclamation points. We're not done. Biden's scandal only beginning. Lots more evidence on Ukraine, like today's money laundering of $3 million. 4 or 5 big disclosures. Also, the $1.5 billion China gave to Biden's fund, while Joe was, as usual, failing in his negotiations with China, is worse. Biden says he never talked to his son about his overseas business. Do you think we can prove with our fact-a-day disclosures it's a lie, a false exculpatory statement? Do we have to prove, or do you already know it's a lie and an incriminating statement? Finally, Alexander, if Dem Party doesn't call for investigation on Biden's millions from Ukraine and billions from China, they will own it. Biden's made big money selling public office. How could Obama have allowed this to happen? Will Dems continue to condone and enable this pay for play? Wow, Alexander. The only statement I'm going to make to you, people that watch these videos and know us, they know we're both Greek. They know we understand what's going on in Cyprus. I can confirm without a shadow of a doubt, and I know you'll also be able to confirm, the money laundering pattern that Biden is laying out here, that Giuliani is laying out here, Ukraine, Latvia, Cyprus, U.S., is a fact. It happens.
Yes.
This is without a shadow of a doubt. People that are watching this, you have people who know and understand the region very, very, very well and understand how the money gets laundered. Giuliani is onto something, Alexander.
Yes, he clearly is. And can I just say, I mean, Giuliani, we must never forget, has a background as a federal prosecutor. He was a top federal prosecutor in New York, and it was on the basis of his success as a federal prosecutor that he rose to be mayor of New York. And of course, as a federal prosecutor, he is extremely well informed about financial crimes. I mean, that's almost the nature of what his prosecutorial work would have been about when he was involved in cases as a federal prosecutor in New York. And can I just say, I mean, you are from Cyprus yourself, and as you say, we're both Greeks. We know very well about the kind of things that happen in our part of the world, in Cyprus and in Greece. I've heard from people who have been to Latvia about what goes on there also. And I know that that too is well known for being a route to launder money through, to send money through corruptly from places like Ukraine, through Latvia to Cyprus, from Cyprus to the US, gets laundered along the way so that it comes through to the United States with every appearance of being clean money. But it is, of course, very dirty money where it starts. So what Giuliani is talking about is something he knows about. It's something he's well informed about. And of course, let's be quite clear about this. When he's dropping all these hints, he knows what he's talking about. I mean, I don't mean just that he has the expertise to know. I mean that he has the facts to know. He is far too canny an operator, whatever else he is, not to know the facts before he sends out tweets of this nature. And he's getting this information from Ukraine. Obviously, the Ukrainians or people in Ukraine are now talking, and he's been able to put all this together, and he knows about Latvia, and he knows about Cyprus, and he knows about this $3 million payment, which he's making very clear is just one payment. So he's giving a warning to the Democrats, he's giving a warning to the Bidens, and of course, he's also protecting, or rather I should say supporting, his client, who is of course Donald Trump, because Giuliani is not only a politician, but he's a lawyer. He's not only a federal prosecutor in the past, he's also Donald Trump's private lawyer and has done a very good job for Donald Trump. It needs to be said over in the Russiagate case. So if you put it all together, I think we can take this as pretty authoritative. It's not guesswork. It's not Giuliani going off and inventing things. He knows what he's saying. He knows both what he's saying, both because this is the sort of job he did, and because, as I said, he's getting the information. And we're going to have more and more and more information coming out of Ukraine. And I'm pretty sure that we're going to also start getting information about this extraordinary China deal, about which I will admit I knew very little until now. But I mean, that doesn't look at all good either. I understand that Hunter Biden traveled with his father, Joe Biden, to China on Air Force Two, which is already an extraordinary thing in a case like this. And I'm afraid, very much like Giuliani, I find this idea that Hunter Biden and Joe Biden didn't talk to each other about these business transactions. I mean, well, you're laughing, and I think I would too. I mean, it just happens that Hunter's father is the vice president of the United States. It just happens that they go to China together on Air Force Two. It just happens that Hunter Biden, who has no financial or business experience at all, and who was thrown out of the Marines because of a cocaine habit, it just happens that he does this vast deal in China with Chinese business groups there. Of course, the fact that his father is the vice president has nothing to do with it. And it just happens that he does all these deals in Ukraine at the same time that his father, again, is the vice president and just happens to be, the US government's point man in charge of affairs in Ukraine. Well, if you believe all of that, then I have a bridge to sell you.
A lot of coincidences, a lot of just happens that you mentioned over there,
Well,
Alexander.
exactly. Well, there you are.
I mean, this was obvious.
Yeah.
You know, we get back to the previous video that we did,
Yeah. Yeah.
and you know, I want to point out that we said in that video there is a money trail.
Yeah.
If Trump, the Trump White House, Giuliani, Barr, if any of these people really does want to follow the money trail, it will lead to the truth. And I think you're right. Giuliani and the Trump White House, they have that money trail in their hands. I mean, I think they actually have, you know, those documents and that trail, those bank statements, they have them.
Yeah.
I mean, for him to make those tweets, I think we could say that with confidence, correct, Alexander?
Absolutely. Well, that's exactly what I said. By the way, coming back to something else you were saying on our previous video, I think it's increasingly looking as if this leak from the so-called whistleblower, it looks increasingly to me like a preemptive strike. In other words, someone in the Democratic Party was getting wind of the fact that Giuliani and the Trump people are closing in on all this information, are getting all this information, as you say, and they rushed out this tweet, this leak, this so-called leak, to try to preempt it and to sort of try and expand the scandal in some way to include Donald Trump. I say that because we're now getting more and more information about this so-called whistleblower, and it turns out that this whistleblower didn't actually listen to Donald Trump's conversation with Zelensky, has no idea, actually, no direct knowledge of what Zelensky and Trump said to each other. He picked up this information, or she picked up this information from a third party. So it sounds a bit like gossip going around.
It's like a friend of a friend of a friend. Yeah.
A friend of a friend of a friend. And it turns out anyway, and both the Ukrainians are saying this and the US, the White House is saying this, and I'm sure it's true, that the account of that conversation anyway is wrong, and that Trump did not actually make any kind of promises to the Ukrainians in return for their help in carrying out this investigation. Though I should say, and I come back to what I also said in this video, I'm not really sure why putting pressure on the Ukrainians to carry out a corruption investigation is anyway a bad thing. And if you tell the Ukrainians, well, you know, if you're not going to carry out this investigation, this corruption investigation, well, things are not going to look well for you. But if you do, well, things will look better for you. I mean, that seems to me, again, like pretty standard politics. If you're talking about corruption, a money trail, real investigation, then I don't honestly see that Donald Trump did anything wrong. But that's my view. The fact of the matter is, as I said, we have, I am sure, evidence of the money trail. And listen carefully to Giuliani's words. This scandal is going to get much bigger if the Democrats aren't careful. If they don't do something now, they will own it.
Yeah,
now,
I think
it couldn't be more clear. Yeah. That is a clear warning and a threat, if you like, to the Democrats.
Yeah, I think you're exactly right. I think it's either a preemptive strike, in other words, to try and get ahead of the story.
Yeah.
Or, in my view, I think there may be that possibility that this is somebody at the DNC or the Democrat Party who is saying, you know what, Biden is not going to make it. It's very obvious that he's having a lot of trouble just on the primary campaign trail. There's no chance he'll beat Trump. He's making a fool of himself. We need to push Warren up. So let's get this story out there. Let's also implicate Trump while we're at it, so we have a win-win. And then let's move on to focus on Warren. And maybe if people who view this program watch H.A. Goodman, and I think he has very solid reporting on this, where he says you may be looking at Hillary, making a last-minute bid for the presidency to win the primary for the Democrats. And we do know that Warren did meet with Hillary a couple of weeks ago. So this is a lot of speculation on my end.
Yeah.
But it could be a possibility that, this leak was done in order to remove Biden. But we'll see. I mean, there's no doubt that, this is fishy. Something doesn't smell right because this was obvious.
Yeah. I mean, can I just make a point? The point I was making about it being a preemptive strike, being an organized leak, doesn't at all exclude your theory. Right. And yes, it's speculation, but I actually think it's quite informed speculation because, in a sense, from the Democrats' point of view, them getting the story out first and then telling Biden, look, you cannot go on running for the presidency with all this going on, does enable them to get control of this before Donald Trump himself plays with it. I mean, let's be clear about this. It will be a disaster for the Democrats. It looks to me, actually, like a disaster of for the Democrats, however this is going to play out. Because, as you said, the money trail exists. And all the indications are that Trump and Giuliani have all the information. But maybe it's less of a disaster for the Democrats if they can leverage it to get Biden out, and to do so before Trump and Giuliani really expose it in ways that is most convenient to them. So that might be the reason for this very strange leak, which, as I said, looks like a very, very carefully planned, very orchestrated affair. I mean, there are legal issues with this leak. I don't want to get into too much detail here, but the story is that the whistleblower passed it on to the Inspector General of the CIA. The Inspector General of the CIA said this is, a serious, urgent case matter, and referred it to the Director of National Intelligence. And the Director of National Intelligence says, look, I can't report this to Congress as you want, because I would be reporting against my own boss, who is the President of the United States, who is legally entitled to do exactly what he did during this conversation. So that looks like it's a very manipulated incident. And that, I think, does, again, point very much to the Democrats, or some people in the DNC, being behind it.
Yeah, this thing, I agree with you, Alexander, because if they can get to this early, then Trump can't use it, when the real campaigning begins for the 2020 election.
Yes.
So they get to it during the primaries. They get Joe Biden out of there, who was a messy candidate to begin with. That's why Obama hasn't endorsed him either. They all know. They all know that Biden was up to all kinds of stuff that you rightly said Giuliani and Trump have their hands on. There's no way he could run with all this. And this gets really messy. We'll get to China in a minute, Alexander. We'll finish off with Ukraine, the first part of it, because now we have a whole China corruption story brewing. But the Ukraine thing is so messy because you have these Democrats running on a platform of the Green New Deal and climate change, and they're the party of the environment. And here you have, which no one has dug into, but we at the Duran were writing about this way in the beginning, and I've pulled up some of our articles, and one of the articles that we have, Alexander, has this title: Hunter Biden's oil fracking dream not looking so good. Chevron pulls out of Ukraine energy project. Now, everyone that's watching this, Alexander is probably one of the foremost experts as to what happened in Ukraine, and you understood the coup and the war very well. Alexander, when I was researching this news and this story way back when, I understood that Slavyansk, which was a city that they were fighting over in the East Ukraine, a very brutal battle, a pivotal battle. I understood that Burisma, Hunter Biden, Devon Archer, and Ukraine oligarchs that were in this company, Burisma, this energy company, they wanted to clear the land. They wanted to get people out of their homes in East Ukraine, and they wanted to start fracking. What better way to clear the land and get people out of their home than to go for all-out war, to level the entire area? This is, once again, I don't have the concrete facts, but I do know that that Chevron and Shell were invested in energy projects in Ukraine, in Slavyansk, in East Ukraine. They had contracts to frack in those areas, but people were living there, so they couldn't get to it. And all of a sudden, you have a coup and you have a war, and they're fighting over this territory. And who's there? Hunter Biden, Joe Biden, Devin Archer, and all these guys. And this is the Democrat Party, the party of climate change and AOC's Green New Deal and all of that stuff. And here they are fighting over land to frack in Ukraine. And before you get to it, Alexander, we're talking about, Russian energy, which passes through Ukraine. So this was a great way to also try to displace Russia from the energy market to Europe. So this is a messy, messy story for the Democrats.
Very, very messy, because as you correctly say, the ideology clashes with the actual behavior on the ground. Can I just repeat a point which you've made? These are facts. We're actually talking about facts. This is not speculation. Hunter Biden was involved in this business. No question about this. This business was involved in fracking activities in eastern Ukraine. And Slavyansk, for those who are not familiar with the war in East Ukraine, was where the uprising was, the pivotal city in the uprising in eastern Ukraine. It was besieged for months by the Ukrainian army. It was eventually captured by the Ukrainian army, and that was a huge battle in the war. And many people in eastern Ukraine still feel very, very bitter about the fighting that happened at Slavyansk and the way in which the Ukrainians captured the city, as I said, after this prolonged siege, after the blockade of the city, after the bitter fighting that went there. So to discover that behind all this fighting, there was also a grubby commercial operation to make money, which at the same time so blatantly contradicts the Democrats' stated green policies, and which involves all this money going backwards and forwards from Ukraine to the United States via all these strange routes through Latvia and Cyprus. I mean, that is a terrible thing. And in relation to Joe Biden, I have the clearest memory of Joe Biden coming to Ukraine early in 2014. I'm talking about Joe Biden, the vice president of the United States. He has a meeting with the newly installed Ukrainian cabinet, which meets after the Maidan coup. And they have this discussion, and a few days later, the war in eastern Ukraine begins. And at that time, and this is before we knew the whole story about what Hunter Biden and all these people were doing, at that time, it was already being reported that, in fact, it was this meeting chaired by Joe Biden. Joe Biden, the vice president of the United States, chairing a Ukrainian cabinet meeting. Just think of that. That was the meeting where the decision was taken to start essentially the war. So it all looks, frankly, terrible. And can I just say, before we get on to China, but also to remember,
we still have China.
Well, we still have China. Remember something else. Who else is behind all of this? Who else is there? Joe Biden is the vice president. Who's the president? Who appoints Joe Biden to be his point man in Ukraine? Who sends Biden to China on Air Force Two? Does he know what's going on in the background? Is he aware that Joe has all these interests and connections there? Once again, I asked this question about Barack Obama. What did the president know? And when did he know it? And note carefully that Giuliani is very careful to refer to Obama himself in all of these tweets.
It's an incredible story, and it makes perfect sense why they cannot have Biden be the Democrat candidate for president. They just can't do it. He's got just too many skeletons.
Too many skeletons, absolutely.
Lying around.
Absolutely. I mean, can we also just say, I mean, we had all these stories about things that Joe Biden said. I mean, it was frankly often extremely embarrassing things that he said in the 70s. This is on a completely different scale to those things. I mean, you can always look back and say, well, in the 1970s, Joe Biden was a different person, and what he said then wasn't perhaps hadn't the traction that it has today. This that we are talking about is corruption happened contemporaneously in our present time, whilst Joe Biden is Vice President of the United States, acting as point man for the United States in a country where he played an absolutely key role in bringing about political changes which ended in a major war.
Okay, Alexander, we're not even done. That's just one side of the equation. Now let's get to China, which is a whole nother huge scandal for Biden and Hunter Biden. Let me just get to, I think Zero Hedge does a really good job of summarizing Peter Schweitzer's book, where he chronicles and details what Hunter Biden and Joe Biden were up to in China. So let me just read you these bullet points, Alexander, and then you can analyze them. So this is from Zero Hedge. Here's what we know about Hunter's dealings in China based on Schweitzer's reporting via our May report. Number one, Hunter Biden and his partners created several LLCs involved in multi-billion-dollar private equity deals with Chinese government-owned entities. Number two, the primary operation was Rosemont Seneca Partners, an investment firm founded in 2009 and controlled by Hunter Biden, John Kerry's stepson, Chris Hines, and Hines' longtime associate, Devin Archer. The trio began making deals through a series of overlapping entities under Rosemont. Three, in less than a year, Hunter Biden and Devin Archer met with top Chinese officials in China and partnered with the Thornton Group, a Massachusetts-based consultancy headed by James Bulger, nephew of famed mob hitman James Whitey Bulger. Number four.
You couldn't make this up.
This is unbelievable.
Anyway, carry on.
It's unbelievable. Number four. According to the Thornton Group's Chinese language website, Chinese executives extended their warm welcome to the Thornton Group with its U.S. partner Rosemont Seneca chairman Hunter Biden, second son of the now Vice President Joe Biden. Number five. Officially, the China meets were to explore the possibility of commercial cooperation and opportunity. However, details of the meeting were not published to the English language version of the website. Number six, the timing of this meeting was also notable. It occurred just hours before Hunter Biden's father, the vice president, met with Chinese President Hu Jintao in Washington as part of the National Security Summit, according to Schweitzer. And finally, Alexander, perhaps most damning in terms of timing and optics, just 12 days after Hunter and Joe Biden flew on Air Force Two to Beijing, Hunter's company signed a historic deal with the Bank of China, described by Schweitzer as the state-owned financial behemoth often used as a tool of the Chinese government. To accommodate the deal, Alexander, the Bank of China created a unique type of investment fund called Bohai Harvest RST, otherwise known as BHR.
Well, there you go. Now, maybe
that's a lot to get to, but let's have you break it down.
That is a huge amount to get through. And of course, we still don't know the whole intricacies of these operations. But let's look at this from the Chinese point of view. Now, of course, in China, it is very common for the sons of prominent officials to go into business and for them to be connected with each other. So what will they have seen? They will have seen Hunter Biden coming along with Joe Biden in Air Force Two. And whilst Joe Biden is doing all kinds of things and holding national security summits, and they will have assumed that that the two were acting in concert with each other. I say they will have assumed that. Of course, they may have been given more reasons to believe that because we don't know exactly what they were told. But this is a huge deal. And again, what is Hunter Biden's background, expertise, skill in arranging deals of this kind? This is not the sort of thing young men do. This is something that a businessman builds up decades of expertise before they can carry out ventures on this scale. I mean, we don't yet know whether there was any actual financial corruption or illegality in this deal. But it looks like titanic cronyism. And of course, in terms of Hunter Biden and Joe Biden's responsibilities as president of the United States, a gigantic conflict of interest. At the very least, it should have been disclosed and talked about at the time.
Let me read you a quote from the New York Post, Alexander, to break this down even further. You said it was a titanic exhibition of cronyism. I believe those were your words. I mean, here's the New York Post. It was an unprecedented arrangement. The government of one of America's fiercest competitors going into business with the son of one of America's most powerful decision makers. Chris Hines claims neither he nor Rosemont Seneca Partners, the firm he had part ownership of, had any role in the deal with Bohai Harvest. Nonetheless, Biden, Archer, and the Rosemont name became increasingly involved with China. Archer became the vice president of Bohai Harvest, helping oversee some of the fund's investments.
Well, there you go. And can I just say, Christopher Hines, as we've discussed in an earlier video, actually eventually fell out with Hunter Biden because, as I said, he became increasingly concerned by the activities of these two characters in Ukraine. And now he's trying to distance himself from what they were doing with China. But it looks again as if the vice president's son is helping China. By the way, can I just say something? I mean, the Bank of China, which looks as if it was the major investor, the entity that pulled all this together, used to be the central bank of China. It was then, it ceased to be the central bank in the 50s, but it is still very, very much a core bank within the Chinese economic system. If you go to Shanghai, you see their headquarters in Shanghai. Well, I mean, their office in Shanghai. And it's absolutely obvious that this is absolutely an institution that is part of the country's economic power structure. And as we know, in China, the political and economic things are blended together. It's that kind of a state. It doesn't pretend to be otherwise. In the United States, things are supposed to be done differently. And yet here we see, without any disclosure, the vice president's son dealing directly with China. And I think we need to make this clear. He's not dealing with just Chinese businesses. He is dealing with China. And he is getting Chinese money on a colossal scale into the United States, investing in the United States, in assets in the United States, and he's making a killing out of it.
Flying on Air Force Two with the vice president.
Flying on Air Force 2.
On a state visit.
On a state visit.
Isn't that in and of itself a red flag, Alexander? You're on Air Force 2. You're with the vice president of the United States, and you're pulling in these deals.
I think it's much more than a red flag. I think it's a scandal. I think it's an awful thing. I think it's, as I said, a blatant conflict of interest. I mean, Hunter Biden is not a poor man. He could have certainly, if he wanted to do a deal in China by himself, he could have bought himself an airline ticket. Why did he need to fly on Air Force 2? I mean, that simply isn't necessary. I mean,
Well, why did he? Why did he?
Because I come back to what I said. In China, it's well established, as I said, that the children of political leaders get involved in business, and that was the message he was conveying. He was conveying to the Chinese, look, I may in all other respects be a nobody, but I am the vice president's son. I have those contacts. I'm able to fly on Air Force Two. I am a princeling in the US system, just as you business people are princelings in the Chinese system. Let's get together and do this deal. I will enable you, China, to get into the United States and bring your money into the United States, and you in return will make me rich. Very rich, extremely rich.
Alexander, to wrap it up, we've been going at it for a good 35 minutes. This is a huge story, and there's so much to break down. I'm sure we'll be covering it
again and again, because we're only at the beginning. I mean, we've got some knowledge. We've, as you rightly say, we've been covering Ukraine for a long time and what Hunter Biden was doing in Ukraine. But China is only just starting, and that looks like it was on a far bigger scale, at least in financial terms.
Yeah, and I want to go back to Biden's video testimony, I guess is the best way to call it, where he admits strong-arming the Ukraine government to fire the prosecutor general, Mr. Shokin. Was Biden feeling guilt? Was he looking to brag? What do you think is the reason that he would come up with that admission? Was it just plain stupid? Because it's that testimony that I think, without a shadow of a doubt, proves that Biden was involved in all of this corruption. I mean, it's like he went to court and he kind of said, yeah, I did it. Yeah, this is how I did it. Yeah. And what are you going to do about it? Yes. I mean, what would compel someone to just lay it all out there like that, to lay out their crimes and their corruptions just right out there on the table? And you get to this point where we are today. Yeah.
Well, an extraordinary degree of arrogance and an extraordinary degree of impunity. I mean, clearly, Joe Biden never believed that he would ever be called to account for this. I mean, as far as he was concerned, Ukraine was essentially a colony, and he never imagined in the pre-Trump world where this happened that anybody would ever one day call him to account for it, either in the Ukraine or in the United States. And I think what he was also doing, by the way, by behaving in this fashion. I mean, first of all, I mean, it's quite clear he was not embarrassed. He's not ashamed. He's clearly, and in fact, he's bragging in the most brazen fashion. But I think, again, this is something of a display of power. It's Al Capone coming along. Sorry to use that word, but, Al Capone coming along and bragging to his fellows, his men, I'm able to do this, that, and the other, and no one can touch me. And that's a warning to people in Ukraine, because that's ultimately whom this was directed at. It's a warning to people in Ukraine. You don't mess with the Bidens, because we can get you sacked and there's nothing you can do. And we've got the power of the United States behind us. As we've discovered, the embassy, the US embassy, was obstructing Ukrainian investigations.
It's incredible. Alexander, finally, do you think that Trump is going to press on with this and Giuliani, or are they going to kind of hold this in their back pocket?
Oh, I think they will think that through. I mean, Giuliani is a very clever man. I mean, Trump, to be very clear, the one thing Trump knows is how to win elections. I mean, he's got this tremendous skill in that field. And Giuliani, the one thing he knows is how to win court cases, court battles. And we saw that with Russiagate. So they're going to play this very, very skillfully and very, very well. I mean, we've seen what Giuliani has just done. He's laid out the story of this payment to Hunter Biden. He's made it very clear that he and Trump know all about the paper trail, the money trail that you were speaking about, and how Latvia and Cyprus were used to launder money. He's already given that warning. He's also given them all kinds of information about this Chinese deal, but not all of it. I mean, he's holding an awful lot back. And I think that if Joe Biden carries on with this campaign, we're going to see leak after leak, investigations in Ukraine, Donald Trump and Giuliani tweeting away. Documents will start appearing also before very long. But and how they're going to play it, I mean, I'm not an expert in, how to win elections, but I think that's what they're going to do. The only thing that may preempt it is if the Democrats do that which we said, if they're going to use this leak, if this leak that we were hearing really was an attempt to tell Joe Biden, look, Joe, you can't possibly imagine, you can't honestly believe that you can be president with all this waiting to come out, and get him to step out of the field.
Incredible story, Alexander. We'll be covering it without question as it develops.
No, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, this, can I just say something? I mean, we said this on our previous video. I mean, this is, Donald Trump has often talked about draining the swamp. Well, we'll see whether he does it this time. He hasn't done much of it up to now, but this is a good one for him to start.
This is about as swamp as you can get.
Absolutely.
Without a doubt. And this is a story we've been covering, like we said during the beginning of our video. We've been covering this story for a long time at the Duran.
Absolutely.
To us, this is nothing new. But no. I'm personally very satisfied, very happy that this story is finally starting to see the light of day. Because, Alexander, I think when we were reporting on stuff like this and it didn't have much traction, a lot of people were looking at us like, what are you guys talking about? Well, and thank God we now have this channel and this platform. We have our viewers so that we can, relay what we saw happening back in 2014, 15, and 16 with Ukraine and with Hunter Biden. And now we're going to see China as well.
Well, indeed, so absolutely. And I come back to this big question for me, always the big question. What did Obama know and what was he doing? I mean, all these bad things going on when he's president of the United States. Russiagate, people being spied on, bombs being sent to bomb Syria, jihadis being armed all over the place, and this great philosopher king in the White House who knows nothing, hears nothing, sees nothing, says nothing. Well, I wonder how long it will be before we find out that actually he must have known an awful lot.
God, the Ukraine coup was such a big mistake.
Yeah, absolutely. It was a huge mistake. I mean, they should never have gone there. But they wanted it for two reasons, as it turns out, because obviously they had this great geopolitical play against Russia, which is a big obsession with all these neocons and all these other sort of people. But it now turns out that there were an awful lot of people who were out to make an awful lot of money. Exactly.
Greed. And a lot of people died, and a lot of people paid the price.
An awful lot of people died. If you go to Slavyansk now and you're able to talk to people there, provided they trust you and feel able to talk to you, because of course it's a place where there's great fear. I mean, you tell them exactly what was behind all of this, you'd see what they'd say.
Incredible. Alexander Mercouris, editor-in-chief of the Duran. Thank you very much. Guys, if you like this video, click on the subscribe button down below and click on the notifications bell to make sure you get notifications every time we publish a video. And remember to go to SoundCloud and iTunes and you can get an audio copy of this video, so follow us there. The links are in the description box down below. And please donate to the Duran, PayPal, Patreon, and Subscribe Star. Your donation really helps keep this channel up and running, so we could do very in-depth analysis like this video we just did right now today. And Alexander, something else that helps us to do the analysis that we do is when you go to the Duran shop and you pick up a magic mug which will give you all the energy you need to break down stories like this story, or a beautiful, awesome t-shirt like the one that I see you're wearing right now, which
Absolutely.
that's the black Duran t-shirt with the gold,
With the white,
with the white.
No, you're right. It's gold. It's gold. It's
That's
gold.
the gold? Okay, that's the gold one.
No, I
That's
think it is. It's gold. It absolutely is. It's the blue one. It's the blue one that's white. This is the gold one.
That's
yes,
the gold one.
Which it says that the double-headed eagle, which is the Duran eagle, east and west. And look, we've covered east and west here. We've got the USA, we've got Ukraine, we've got China. We've had to put all this together. And how could we do that if we didn't look at both the east and the west, which is what we do. And obviously it's there. It's on this marvelous T-shirt. These are exceptional T-shirts. I mean, you get lots of T-shirts, some of them not so good, but this is a really, really great T-shirt. It's comfortable. It's 100% cotton. It fits beautifully. It's very smart, like all our other shirts are, like our polo shirts are. Viewers will have often seen me in polo shirts, and all our shirts are great. Our hats are great. Our hoodies are great. Our stickers are great. You've been refreshing all the merchandise, all the items on our shop. It's really high quality, just as these mugs are. And I've been, how do we keep refreshed and learn about all of these things and absorb all these things and analyze all these things? Is because we drink refreshing tea or coffee. I think coffee in your case, tea in mine, from mugs like this. By the way, for those who want to know, I've been drinking Assam tea today. This is dark tea from India, very British, very classical, but it's been a sort of wet, miserable day. So I've been drinking that, which you drink with milk. And it's perhaps the most traditional English tea. It's the one the British always drink in the morning. So it's a British tea from a beautiful Duran mug, keeping you refreshed, vigorous, alert, ready to read, ready to give all this enormous analysis, this tremendous analysis. You can find other examples of our analysis in our books. We've done 2 books on Russiagate, almost as complicated a story as this one, but we're going to have lots more analyzing to do with the Biden story, because that's also going to be very complicated. But in essence, like Russiagate, very simple, which is the point we make in our books. And we've also got a book on Brexit, which does exactly the same thing. So help the Duran, go to our shop, buy these wonderful things. Alex will tell you how to do it.
Just look in the description box down below, theduranshop.com. You will find a link there. Please help support the Duran. Pick up some merchandise. Alexander Mercouris, editor-in-chief of the Duran. Thank you very much. Till next time, everybody. Take care.